Keep an eye on politics. Congress has advanced a stopgap bill to keep the federal government operational through the end of September. It was a nearly party line affair with just one Republican voting no and one Democrat voting yes. The bill now heads to the U.S. Senate, where it will need to garner at least 7 Democratic votes to survive a filibuster. 16th District Congressman Darin LaHood, one of the 216 Republicans who supported the bill in the House, joins me live this morning to discuss this and some other things. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
Beyond the $13 billion in non-defense spending cuts that you voted for in yesterday's spending bill, where are the rest of the cuts coming from, and how will it impact your constituents?
Well, good morning. Yesterday, we passed a continuing resolution which funds the government. We had an obligation, responsibility to make sure the federal government didn't shut down. I wish we could have done it through the regular appropriations process, but we didn't get our work done on time. So this allows us to continue funding through September 1st and allow us to work on a lot of the economic initiatives that President Trump ran on, particularly on tax cuts, on bringing down inflation, making the economy work better. And so I look at the continuing resolution we passed yesterday as a way to keep the government functioning. Hopefully the U.S. Senate will pass it today or tomorrow.
The economy worked better, you mentioned, but right now, you know, the stock market keeps plummeting and there are a lot of layoffs, so unemployment ticked up. I know that a lot of Republicans say short-term pain for long-term gain, but can you tell me, regarding the cuts in this CR, can you tell me what they will contain and how will it impact your constituents? You know, I mean, can you give us an idea of where these cuts will be coming from?
Well, the cuts we're talking about, either through DOGE or through cutting spending, those will come at a later date. What we did in the continuing resolution is there was very, very limited cuts in there. This keeps government functioning through September 1st of this year. If you go back and look at FY, our fiscal year 2025, we funded things up until this week, and this will continue funding at the same level that we've had over the last year here. The cuts that people are concerned about through DOGE and other means, those will come at a later time. But I give Elon Musk and the DOGE committee, the Department of Government Efficiency, a lot of credit for coming up with some proposed cuts. Now, we're going to have to vote on those. And before I vote on those, I'm going to obviously talk to my constituents and do an analysis. But this would be a much different conversation if we were $36 trillion in surplus or $36 trillion in debt.
Are you on board with everything that President Donald Trump is doing, despite the potential impact? You know, again, we're talking about mass layoffs and real estate sales, federal buildings being up for sale, cuts to education. You know, there could be some real impact on your constituents and on the state of Illinois. So are you on board with everything, or are you looking at each item, you know, through a filter?
Well, part of my job as a member of Congress, I'm attentive to my 750,000 constituents that elected me, and I have an oversight role, checks and balances with the legislative branch. So I'm going to look at everything that's put forth to us and make an analysis and look at my district and find out what's best. But I'll give you a good example. I'm not a fan of tariffs. Tariffs are taxes. They're taxes on my farmers, my constituents, my business folks. I think you got to be very careful on tariffs. They can have they can cause collateral damage to the economy, particularly in a state like Illinois, where we export a lot of things around the globe. And so, again, that's an area that I have concerns about. But if you go back and look at the election last year, one thing that never changed is 70% of the people thought the country was headed in the wrong direction based on the economy and illegal immigration. So I think if we focus on those two things to fulfill those campaign promises, you know, I think President Trump's agenda will be a good one and one that will affect people in a positive way.
You mentioned real quickly, you mentioned, you know, you're not a fan of tariffs, and you mentioned farmers in particular. I used to live in Peoria. I understand that, you know, that is a huge concern. Does the issue or the idea of a global trade war concern you? Can you kind of keep this quick, though? But I am interested in your answer.
Absolutely, because what happens in a trade war is the first pawn in a trade war is agriculture. Remember, Illinois, the number one industry in Illinois is agriculture. We've led the nation 11 years in a row, soybean production, corn production. So yeah, a trade war will affect our farmers and manufacturers. So I think you got to be careful with tariffs in getting into a trade war, particularly with China or other folks. Now, China doesn't play by the same rules and standards, so you have to hold them accountable. So it's a tough balance to try to find.
Okay, all right. Again, we could, I say this all the time, we could talk for many more minutes, but we have to wrap it up now. But Congressman Darin LaHood, thank you so much for joining me this morning. And we'll be right back.